Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Live with Mel. This episode is brought to you by Yellow Cab Company of DC. If you're looking to avoid rideshare prices, then check out the Yellow Cab Company of DC when you are in the nation's capital. The state of the economy is on many Americans' minds. Now, the Biden administration has been talking about the economic growth that the United States has seen. And while Biden last night during his State of the Union address did speak about the growth of the economy in the United States, many Americans at home are not necessarily feeling the growth. And with the threat of war looming in the distance, and not necessarily the distance, many people feel as though war is right around the corner and that the American people will soon be entering into the war that is going on in Europe. And while the threat of war is very worrisome to the American people, many Americans are wondering how entering into this global conflict will affect Americans here at home, specifically with the economy. Now, again, Biden has been speaking about how the economy has grown. Last night, he stated that during this administration has created 6.5 million new jobs and that the economy grew at a rate of 5.7% last year, the strongest growth in nearly 40 years. But again, many Americans are saying they're not feeling that at the moment, and that is due to inflation because U.S. inflation rate accelerated to 7.5, the highest since 1982. And as we know right now, many Americans are worried about what is going to be going on at the gas tank. Now, when speaking with Americans about the Russia-Ukraine crisis and the economy, many Americans are worried about the rising cost of gas, the rising cost of oil. Now, while many countries, actually most countries, have chosen not to put sanctions against Russia's oil industry, private sector companies have decided to cut ties with the oil companies in Russia. So again, initially, people were worried about sanctions being put on the oil companies, but governments have not been keen to do that because they don't want to see the rising cost of oil. However, private sector companies have decided that they no longer want to work with oil-based companies that are coming out of Russia because of the atrocities that Russia is committing against Ukraine at the moment. So major companies, major oil companies like ExxonMobil and Shell have started cutting ties with Russia's oil industry. Now, these cutting ties with the oil industry will probably have a bigger impact on Europe than it will in the United States. But there is still a possibility that as more and more oil companies decide to not do business with Russia, that it could affect us here in the United States at the gas pump. Now, last night, during the State of the Union address, President Biden announced that the United States has worked with over 30 other countries to release 60 million barrels of oil from reserves around the world. Again, they are aware of the fact that this war that Russia is trying to wage will affect people at the gas pump, and they're trying to deal with the situation. Now, again, sanctions on oil have not happened, but private sector companies are keen on ensuring that they're not doing business with Russia, and that could affect us at the gas pump. And we have to see, and it also depends on how long the war is. By releasing the reserves, it could put us in a position where we are good for a while, but this is not a long-term solution. And depending on how long the war is, it could have an effect on us. Now, when we talk about oil, we mostly talk about gas at the pumps, how much we have to pay for putting gas into our car. And over the past year, we have seen the gas prices skyrocket. across the United States. But that's not the only thing that we have to worry about, because the price of gas essentially will affect the price of goods, because the price of gas is what companies have to pay in order to ship goods from the point of origin to the consumer. Now, something else that will affect the American people is the global supply chain. Now, President Biden last night announced that the United States will be joining the European Union and Canada in restricting Russians from entering into our airspace. So again, Russians will not be able to enter into airspace. However, what most people don't know is that while the United States, the EU, Canada, and now several other nations are in a position where they are restricting people from coming and Russians from coming in and using the airspace, we are seeing something different happen, because Russia has closed its airspace to 36 different countries. But let's go ahead and go to the comments, and then we'll talk about how the airspace will affect this. So Joanna says, yes, higher gas prices and inflation are certain. We are already experiencing higher gas prices. It's going to be tough. We are recovering from COVID, and now we are hit with this war Putin is pushing for, and we are going to be hit by this war. Now, like I was stating before I went to the comments, the United States, Canada, and the EU have essentially closed off the airspace to Russian planes, but Russia has decided to close its airspace to 36 different countries. Now, if you look at Russia on a map, you do realize that Russia is a gigantic company. Russia is a huge country, country that takes up a lot of landmass. And because Russia has decided to close its airspace to 36 different countries, this will affect the global supply chain, because now planes that would normally fly over Russia that are carrying goods will now have to find new routes, which will take longer and which will also cost more fuel. So the global supply chain will be hit because Russia has decided to close its airspace to 36 different countries. Now, companies are going to have to make decisions. Since they will no longer be able to fly over Russia, since Russia has closed its airspace, they're going to have to either take longer routes to get the goods delivered to countries, to consumers. So they'll either have to account for more gas to fly their planes, or they may also start carrying less loads and use smaller planes in order to try and keep the cost of shipping down. Again, this will directly affect the consumer. This will directly affect products on the shelves. If companies decide that they're going to ship less goods because it's cheaper to ship less goods, we may soon start seeing less products on the shelves. And this is a big deal, because if we look at things now, if we go into grocery stores, if we go into shopping centers, if we go into stores, we do see that shelves are already empty. And because companies may choose to carry less products in their planes because they have to reroute around Russia, we may start seeing more empty shelves in the stores. Now, something else that could greatly affect the consumer here in the United States and also in Europe as well is, because the planes have to reroute, because it's going to take longer, and because it's going to take more oil, more gas, they may pass that extra shipping cost on to the consumer. And we may see that the price of goods, which have already shot up, increase even more. We'll probably see it on the consumer end. And again, it also depends on how long this war happens. Now, again, the one thing that many Americans are concerned about are the price of gas and the price of oil. Now, we have seen that the price of oil has shot up. Brent crude futures rose more than $8, touching a peak of $113.02 a barrel, the highest it's been since June 2014. It did eventually go down, but again, there is a possibility for it to spike again. And even though it went down to about even though it went down, it's still not at the low end. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures also jumped more than $8 a barrel, with it hitting its highest since August 2013. So again, we are seeing futures rise to the highest it's been since 2014-2013 era. And again, we will see this at the pump. Now, while the 30 countries have released the reserves, this is something that could help the American people and Europeans as well while we deal with the conflict going on between Ukraine and Russia. However, that is a temporary situation. This is a situation, this is like putting a Band-Aid on it. And while they released the reserves, this is not something that can hold us down for long periods of time. This is definitely a temporary solution to the oil industry. Now, while Americans at the moment, again, Americans are worried about the economy, Americans are worried about inflation, and the war in Europe, which we could enter into, depending on which direction Putin takes this, could definitely affect the American pockets. It can affect prices of goods, it can affect the goods on the shelves, and we may be in a situation where we see less and less products on the shelves and the prices increase exponentially. But while we're in a situation where the war could affect us, things here at home will affect us as well. Now, according to the New York Times, the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, told lawmakers that the central bank is poised to lift interest rates from near zero. So we could be seeing interest rates rise as well. And we could be seeing that happening this month. So with interest rates rising and the war, this could definitely affect the way that Americans will be able to obtain goods, the amount of money that we're going to end up spending on rent, on natural gas, on utilities, and everything. While President Biden last night during his State of the Union stated that the U.S. economy is growing, that the U.S. economy has seen an increase in jobs. If you ask everyday Americans how they view the economy, most Americans will say that it is bad. Because while we're seeing jobs, while we're seeing economic growth, everyday Americans are struggling. Everyday Americans are in a situation where they don't have enough money to pay for the rising cost of goods, the rising cost of gas, the rising cost of everything. Inflation has hurt the American people tremendously. And as we enter into war, it could affect the economy in a negative way. It could affect the global supply chain. It already has affected the global supply chain. It's going to affect the cost of oil. It's going to affect the amount of goods that we see in stores. There are a lot of little pieces that need to be put in place in order to try and keep the economy strong as we come out of COVID, as we're dealing with inflation, and as we're dealing with the war in Europe. Will the Biden administration have the ability to handle the economy in a way that it keeps the everyday Americans afloat? The Biden administration can continue to celebrate and gloat about the economic growth that America's seeing, but it doesn't negate the fact that everyday Americans are not feeling that economic growth. The American people are hurting. But let's go ahead and go to the comments. Joanna says, I just think by closing airspace is not a win for everyone. Plus, I feel it can push the Psycho Putin to use nuclear weapons. Now, talking about airspace, closing the airspace is something that has already been done by both sides. Russia has closed its airspace to 36 countries, and the US, Canada, and European Union has closed its airspace to Russia as well. It's something that's done, and it's going to directly affect the economy, the Russian economy, the American economy, and the European economy as well. Planes will now have to reroute around Russia. Again, this is coming from the Western side. It's going to affect us. It's going to affect the amount of goods in stores. It's going to affect costs because, again, now that these companies have to reroute around Russia, it's going to take them longer. It's going to cost them more money, and those costs are going to be put on the consumer. So again, we are in a situation where the rising cost of everything is going to affect the American pocket tremendously. And again, going back to the second part of your statement, it may push Putin to use nuclear weapons. I'm not sure that's going to be the thing that pushes him. But again, we just have to wait and see. The American economy for everyday Americans is at a very, very delicate position. Many Americans cannot deal with the rising cost of everything. And as war is right around the corner, we will continue to see prices going up. Now, during Biden's State of the Union address last night, he did outline different ways that the Biden administration will try to keep inflation down. Again, with the ocean liners, he's going to ensure that they're not overcharging Americans. He also wants to see American goods being purchased in America from beginning to end. So we're not that reliant on foreign entities, which again will bring down costs because we won't have to reroute around Russia. However, these policies that Biden is proposing, like having goods being made in America from start to finish and bringing it to the consumer, may take a very long time to actually implement. And that won't affect Americans today. It won't affect Americans a year from now. And Americans need something to be done. Because while the Biden administration, I know I keep saying this, the Biden administration is celebrating and they're gloating about the economic growth, but everyday Americans are not feeling it. They're not feeling it at all. Most Americans believe the economy is in a worse place. Most Americans feel as though they don't have enough money to continue living the lifestyle that they lived. And by saying the lifestyle that they lived, I mean afford their mortgage, afford their food, afford heating, afford cooling. We're in a situation where Americans could be making the same amount of money they're making a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but the cost of everything around them has doubled or tripled. And Americans are now finding themselves in a situation where they don't know what to do and they don't know how they're going to pay their bills or afford food. The war in Europe has also caused many Americans to worry because the war in Europe can also affect the American economy tremendously. Now, at the end of the day, the sanctions, the war, private sector companies deciding not to do business with Russia will affect Russia more. And as we see right now, the Russian economy is in the trash. It will affect Russia for years to come. We also see the Russian ruble is worth less than an American penny. And while this will have a negative impact on the Russian economy, it could possibly have a negative impact on the American economy as well if the Biden administration doesn't step up and put in place policies to ensure that the American economy continues to grow. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Mel. I come live every single Monday through Wednesday to bring you guys current events and let you know what's happening across the globe and right here in this great nation as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week. Have a great one.